Um, Thank you for joining us for our fourth quarter small business webinar with the Shawnee Chamber of Commerce. I am Marlene Shirley, and we have John Adesi with the Kansas Small Business Development Center, Josh Smith with Johnson County Community College. Are you with continuing education? Is that correct, Josh?
Yes.
Okay. And then Dennis Monahan with Central Bank of the Midwest. And they are going to be sharing tips with us on how to recession-proof your business. So it should be a great conversation. If you have questions, comments, you can add them to the chat and we'll make sure we get those addressed. Either throughout or at the end, we'll see how it works. We'll be a little flexible with this today. So I will go ahead and let you gentlemen start. I don't know who wants to start. John, I guess we'll start with you.
Oh my. All right. Well, thank you. I'm John Adesi. I'm one of the 3 business advisors at the Kansas Small Business Development Center at Johnson County Community College, one of 8 regions across the state of Kansas. And hey, just to preface today's discussion, I know in the title it talks about recession. Look, it's 50-50 whether we're going to be in a recession. There are certainly headwinds against small businesses. There's certainly tightening out there. And so, whether you think there's going to be a recession or not, there's still some things that need to be done in a business to be shipshape sailing into those headwinds. So don't let the title scare you away. We're just talking about being more efficient today. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Marlene.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Dennis Monahan. I just wanted to jump in. Those are great comments, and it doesn't necessarily mean just because even if we're in a recession, and some might argue we've been in the recession for a while, but that businesses do poorly. There are some businesses that actually thrive during recessions, and some that really get hurt, especially. And this is really an interesting time because in most recessions you have really pretty high unemployment, which right now we have that kind of double whammy with rates rising and then with labor demanding more wages. So it's hard for everybody to keep their employees. So I think a lot of what was, and we've done some prep work, is tied to employees and keeping employees, because in most cases, the employee base is one of the most key things to a business, and keeping and attracting good employees is very, very difficult at this point in time. So, but I'm going to make a couple comments based this, and this really kind of go not just in a recession, but it's really pretty standard for most businesses, and even in good times, is the need to conserve cash and have liquidity around. In recessions, there's usually a lot of opportunities that arise, and if you have some liquidity, you can actually capitalize on some of those. Interest rates, though, I think we've talked about are really rising. I think the 5-year Treasury actually went down a tad, but it's still a lot higher than it was. Prime, which a lot of our business loans are tied to, floating rate prime, was at 3.25. Now it's up to 7%. So I mean, it's really in our business, we look at cash flow, and it's really important to understand where your cash flow is going and be able to do some projections. Banks love projections. We love to see where you're thinking things are going. And I think a lot of what Josh and John have talked about in the prep work is communication, really being able to communicate, not just internally with your employees, but it's really imperative that you stay in touch with your suppliers, your customers, and I would say selfishly, your banker. So, I mean, bankers really hate surprises. So if you can keep them up to date with what's going on, I think that's really key. I'll be quiet for a little bit.
So yeah, I'm Josh Smith in continuing education, workforce development at Johnson County Community College, and I work with a lot of businesses from small mom and pop all the way up to Fortune 500 companies in the Kansas City metro area and really throughout the United States. So I get a chance to hear the pain points from a lot of HR professionals of what trends they're seeing, what challenges they're facing with. And as Dennis mentioned, we learned a lot from the pandemic. And as we came out of the pandemic, I think there's a lot of lessons learned about, can we retain our talent? Because boy, if we have to let them go during a slowdown, it's really that much more difficult to find talent down the road and then get them up to speed and be productive with them. So that's probably one of the lessons we've definitely learned. And as a business owner prepares for maybe some turbulent times ahead, I think it's what can we do with the talent that we have? How can we be able to pivot to so we can still stay relevant, still deliver good world-class products to our clients, but also retain the people that we have. And I just posted an article earlier today about the Gen Zers. So depending on what the makeup is in the workforce, know what your workforce is seeking. And the Gen Zers are really looking right now for those learning and development opportunities. They can't all be vice presidents tomorrow, but if they can feel engaged and feel appreciated through opportunities to learn and grow. And I think that's the other big change we're seeing in the marketplace is we all are becoming lifelong learners. Technology is accelerating a lot of this. And so as the challenges that we bring, so we always need to be able to be nimble and quick and being able to adapt. And that's what makes small businesses absolutely amazing is they can pivot much quicker than the large corporate ships can.
Yeah. Thank you. So how do you think small businesses are coping with the labor scarcity and wage inflation? I know you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but
I can jump in there and then I'll let John and Dennis certainly add to this. So I would say their ability for the workforce to be agile, right? It's no longer are you just a widget maker to make widgets A's. You need to be able to work the full production line or all the jobs. And so it's the ability to be able to have them cross-trained so that if you have a need in accounts payable or accounts receivable, that you can have someone that fills in and they can serve your business. But it's also being able to have that plan A, B, and C. If I lost that major account tomorrow, where can I move that person to help me grow the business in another area? So I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And we have seen small businesses be, frankly, outgunned. I have a couple of doctors as clients, and they sent me nearly identical emails some time ago. They were basically like, John, everybody left. And, if you have a situation where you have a small practice and a hospital can come in and go to the RNs and say, hey, look, $15,000 signing bonus, flexible shifts, you're working 3 days, they're long days, benefits, and we're going to bump you up by $5 or $7 an hour. Who's not going to jump ship in that situation? Thankfully, that's not all of our clients, our small business clients. And Josh alluded to the fact that a small business can be a little bit more flexible, can have a mission. People actually seek small businesses to run and to work in because they have a different company culture. They have a family culture. They're more deeply aligned to the mission. They feel like they're part of something. So it's a haven from corporate America. So is that going to happen with everybody? Like I said, with the RNs, no. Very difficult to have that trade-off when you're really talking about some significant compensation changes. But for many businesses, they offer a better environment for the employees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would echo those thoughts. With a small business, especially a small business, can be a little bit more flexible, but I think you need to consider the willingness to be able to pay higher wages. Wages are going up. If you're stuck on it, and kind of think about how much it costs. If you're just doing something that's basic and you can hire anybody to do it, that's one thing. But most businesses require some training and some skill set, and it's a lot harder to get somebody up to speed than it is to keep them there. Be willing to cross-train people rather than pigeonhole them in one spot. I think it's been already alluded to. Maybe get somebody, because people go on vacation, and we're going to talk probably a little bit about this remote work access now. So you don't really always have everybody on site or at the job at the same time. So being able to cross-train and have employees that's somewhat flexible, and then try to. And the banks are as guilty of this as anybody, of not having people in succession. You get comfortable with somebody there and you don't think they're ever going to leave. But when they do, it really causes a big, snafu in the business. So maybe being able to build some bench strength and keep some people, kind of growing in that job, and giving them something different to do, is I think key. So it might be worth, if you have policies and procedures, and a lot of small businesses don't really have set policy procedures, but if you do, maybe review those and make sure they're not too rigid. Because it seems like a lot of it, and I've got some kids that are, in their 20s and 30s that are out in the workforce, and they tend to look at things a little differently than I did when I was their age. So it's, they want more flexibility and vacation and time off. They don't necessarily want to be on the job at 8 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes that just bugs the heck out of me, but you got to learn to adapt and say, okay, you can come in at 10, but you're going to, maybe you need to work till 6 or whatever. So, and some people are just willing to do that kind of thing if you can get those kind of policies in place. So,
Matter of fact, Marlene, that's a good segue. We had a breakfast here with Continuing Ed, and about 60 businesses, Josh, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And we broke into some focus groups after that. And Josh was kind enough to get me all the data from the focus groups. And Marlene, if you give me if I have the ability to share, could I just share my screen for just a moment?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me see. I can,
Because this is going to echo what Dennis is talking about.
yeah.
Down on the bottom with the share screen.
Yeah.
Hopefully you've got something that says allow more than one person to
Yeah,
share.
I did that.
Okay. All
So
right. let
you
me
should
try.
be able to share now.
Awesome. I'm down to one screen because of our little power failure thing here, but hopefully right now you're looking at a word cloud.
Yes, we see it.
And I mean, just to Dennis's point, BAMO right in the middle, flexibility, that was huge. I mean, we see, community involvement and being advocates for the brand and generational differences, employee input, but flexibility was absolutely mentioned just over and over and over again. And that's not easy. Look, if you're a retail store, you're a restaurant. I mean, you've got to have people there at breakfast. You got to have them there at lunch. You got to have them there at dinner. But at least being perhaps letting them choose their shifts, for example. And then a lot of people want to be working from home. The younger employees are not interested in being constrained to 8 to 5, 9 to 5 in a cubicle. If they want to get their work done at 2 a.m. in somewhere, or 3 in the afternoon in a coffee shop, and they're productive and they're getting their work done, they're like, what do you need? Why do you want me to sit here and do this in this constraining environment? So absolutely, that word came right up. Let's see, that was with regard to attracting talent. This was, why do people apply for jobs? Yeah, there we go. Stop moving. I want to make sure I had the right one. So they're referred by other people. It's a good job description, good referral plan again. Community really popped out. We see flexibility again. Culture and mission are really strong. And then the last one was key to retaining employees. And we hear over and over again, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses, right? Which management was front and center. Now, this is something that you have control over, of course, how you're managing people. Culture popped up, checking in. We can talk about that a little bit later, but just communicating with employees, and Dennis and Josh had both mentioned that. Marlene, I'll send you these if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
As a follow-up kind of thing. But this is, what was it, Josh? About 60 businesses putting the stuff in.
Yeah.
And so these are your peers, man. These are your peers seeing what's working to attracting them, keeping them, and getting them.
And just to talk on a couple of those points that John just made. So one point that I would say is, obviously revamping your job descriptions, make sure your job posting is not your job description. I see that oftentimes, but also it may be time to also take a look at, your hiring approach. Are you still basing your qualifications based on experience? A lot of businesses are starting to shift to a skills-based approach of hiring. And so that's something to consider, because those skills that they may require from one industry or one job are transferable oftentimes. So that can help with, labor scarcity. And really, can you identify people that have similar traits and skills you're seeking, and then get them that up training that they might need? So that's one point. We also talked a little bit about, the need for flexible work schedules, flexible work arrangements. I would say the other thing that we're really seeing businesses focus on, this has really been a hot topic the last couple of years, is employee well-being, and encouraging them to disconnect. At the end of the day, on weekends, we need to be a little bit more mindful as bosses and leaders of companies that we're not messaging our employees all hours of the evening, all weekends. I was with a executive a few weeks ago and at a event, and she was sharing with me just how disappointed she was that the president would send these emails in the evening or even text messages at 10:30 at night. So you want to have that balance for your employees for sure. Another point that I'd like to make as well is just, understanding what your best talent's looking for. Are they looking for personal and professional needs? Do they want to become a better cook so they can eat and prepare more healthy meals? They'll just understand what motivates them and try to offer things for them that will show you your appreciation and keep them, because if they're happy employees, they're oftentimes not looking to jump ship for 50 cents more an hour, because they're engaged and they're feeling fulfilled.
I just kind of want to jump back in. I have a real life experience with my youngest daughter who moved out of the area. She's working for a company and they wanted to keep her. And so she was able to stay remote, and she moved up from Kansas City area up to Madison, and she worked for a company that was probably a middle-sized company. And they had offices in several cities, and she liked the job. Of course, she was working 100% remote at this time, but she hadn't gotten a raise in 2 years, and so she was thinking, I need to at least start looking. And she went to look and. She went to go work for she left that job and went to go work for a much bigger company, and mainly because she got like a 50% pay increase. And she doesn't really like working for this bigger company, but one of the employees she worked closely with called her in her old job and said, we hated it that you left, but we really appreciated you leaving because now we all got raises. And so it's kind of funny, but you have to keep, most people said money is not the most important thing, but you have to keep that. That's why people are working. And so you have to have a good environment and all that, but you have to be fair to your employees too, because there are a lot of people out there looking to hire your people away. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in because I thought that was really interesting why they didn't, offer a raise, for in 2 years, just because, the environment was really tough right now. So there's you got to keep your people, otherwise somebody else is going to steal them. So
yeah, Dennis, you bring up a good point, and I done some research on this. There was a Fortune magazine article that came out last month, but 40% of employees they changed jobs in the last 2 years, which we've never seen numbers quite like that before. And we're seeing 4 million voluntary resignations a month. Again, people are changing. They're moving up to either better work cultures, better work environments, the pay, sometimes a motivator. But of those 40% that changed jobs, 60% of them got a pay increase. And it's not uncommon for some of these folks to get, double-digit pay increases. And what hiring managers are learning and owners is that it oftentimes costs them more than had they just given that individual a pay increase, or work with them in that workplace flexibility a little bit more to replace the person, to train that person up. It usually costs them more in the long run. So the more we can do to focus on that retention piece, that seems to be a key component in creating that workplace culture that people want to come into and be a part of every day.
With the uptick in remote and hybrid roles, how are small businesses, you've been talking about retaining, but how does remote and hybrid roles play into that? Are you seeing, what are you seeing with that?
Yeah, when they can fit it into their business model, like I said, a restaurant, that's a little difficult. Retail store might be a little bit difficult. But there's a lot of stuff, you know, I mean, I'm not in my office right now. I'm in a conference room, which is why the lights keep on turning off, by the way. But, you know, I did my job for 2 years at home, in a corner of my living room, basically during COVID. And there's a lot of stuff that can be done, anywhere really. And the flip side of that too, I'll also be thinking of, and look, I would love to be increasing jobs. That's one of our absolute goals of the SBDC. But at the same time, a lot of times I'm asking my businesses to reach out to something like Fiverr, Fiverr, 2 R's, or Upwork, and finding some people out there that are freelancers that could be anywhere. They could be in Oregon or whatever, and help you with your web design. I've used that for patent drawings for clients. I mean, almost any kind of administrative task that you can think of, you can find a freelancer out there. So this cuts both ways, you know. Yes, the employees want that kind of flexibility, but you can make use of that kind of flexibility. If you take what a good administrative person costs you right now and add in the benefits, where you're talking maybe a 20% bump above and beyond minimum, above and beyond compensation, it gets up there right fast. And if you parcel it out to, you know, a dozen professionals in different fields all around the country or all around the world, you can get a lot done in that regard.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've talked about the remote learning quite a bit, which, you know, again, 2 of my kids and then a lot of friends are doing remote almost 100% of the time. One goes in 1 day a week, and today's the day. I guess, you know, Tuesdays. I don't know why they picked Tuesdays, but I think there's a lot of people that like the interaction of being in an office. There's some that would just soon be 100% remote. So if you can be flexible, that is a key. But I think if you're going to be flexible, I mean, you really have to have the ability to measure results. I mean, you have to have defined jobs that say these are your responsibilities and be able to make sure they're being done. And to do that, you actually have to invest in technology, which, you know, banks are slow to invest in technology like that. And, you know, we worked remotely somewhat, but I really like getting away, because I think for me, there's too much distraction. And I like being away from home for at least my work time. But a lot of people just thrive on that, and they can do their work, and they can do it in times that necessarily may not be the normal work times. They can do it in the evening. But I think it's being able to maybe offer those remote work environments. But again, you need to be able to measure the productivity and be able to make sure people are doing their work. So anyway.
And needn't be every day, every shift either. I mean, sometimes if you're working on something where you needn't be at your desk, you know, let them go home and be with their dog while they do the stuff. In some cases, you know, it doesn't have to be a major sea change in your business, but just you can provide people the afternoon off, and as long as they get the stuff done, that might be all the flexibility they need. And again, something that corporate America might struggle with in some cases.
Why is it important for small businesses to invest in training and development when a recession is looming? Or, you know, we just haven't seen a situation like this. It's not normal. I don't think anyone knows what to expect. So whether it's a recession or whatever we're heading into, why is it important for people to invest in training?
Yeah, so I would say it's just important. I kind of said this before, but businesses need to stay flexible, you know, so that they can pivot, they can have those workers pivot or think creatively, you know, so we can stay relevant, so we can exist, and so we can continue to innovate. You know, so many, and John can probably talk at the numbers, but so many of our small businesses make up, you know, the businesses in America today, and drive the economy forward. And so it's important that they do those things so they stay in business. But building up, skills and cross training has probably never been more important as we try to retain and hold on to talent. People are, they've taken a big hit with the, stock market volatility on their retirement savings. So some of them are needing to stay longer in the workforce. And if their health allows them to, I mean, let's get them new tools so they can continue to be relevant and be as productive. And there's that opportunity for cross training as well. There's a generation that they don't want to pick up the phone and make cold calls, and sometimes that's what needs to be done in your business, and so they can learn from the older generation, and versus maybe there's some stuff that an older generation can learn on social media and their online presence and stuff like that. But I think it's important that we invest in employees so that the employees feel more connected to those businesses. We can retain them. And they're usually employees are willing to go the extra mile or put in the extra hard work. I know John and my team did at Johnson County Community College during the pandemic. We wanted to stay relevant. We wanted to stay current. We wanted to be able to continue to justify what we were doing to serve the customers that we work with.
There's a famous quote from Richard Branson. It's getting on to a decade old, but it couldn't be more timely. Train people well enough so they can leave, treat them well enough so that they don't want to. And, so some people are like, why shouldn't I train my employees if they're going to leave? Yeah, you're going to see 3% of people quit. There's a turnover rate of about 36%. It's higher in some industries. The nursing industry is nearly 50% every year. But what's your option? That you don't train them, you don't keep them, you don't invest in them. They see that investment. So if you make that investment in them, they do appreciate that, and they feel more closely aligned with your business. And not to be crass, but you're able to get more out of them, right? They should learn some new skills. And Dennis mentioned some cross training, and Josh mentioned that as well. So there's a lot of pluses. Yes, they're going to go somewhere else sooner or later. People now are going to have 17 jobs over the course of their career. That's an average of 3 years. I mean, we see resumes all the time where people are hopping in a year or so. But to stop training is penny wise and pound foolish.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The employee development is always a key. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend a lot of money on training. There's most jobs have a lot of responsibilities. And if you just give employees some different responsibilities at different times in their career, make them relevant and make them feel like they're growing, I think is the key. It's really an interesting world we're living in right now, because there's just so much with you used to have to go home and watch the news, and now you get the news immediately. Someone will come in and say, "Did you just hear what happened?" And it's like, so the employees are going to hear stuff, and they're going to, and you just got to keep them relevant in your job. Otherwise they'll feel unwanted. So.
Yeah, to add to kind of what Dennis was saying there too, I mean, we do want to continue to grow these talents out of their roles. Hopefully we can treat them well enough so we can keep them. But they're also going to serve as the grass isn't always greener. So sometimes they're going to come back. I shared the number of people that had jumped jobs. Well, 60% of those people are concerned about their stability right now in their new jobs. So some of them may come back. They may become boomerang employees and come back. They also may be great resources if they had a good experience and they unfortunately grew out of their position and were looking for something beyond what we could provide them. They may be a good source for referral of other employees to you. They may tell their neighbors, we had a good experience. John's a good guy to work for. So keep that in mind as well, because they're always going to be a brand ambassador if they leave on a positive note.
Yeah, bringing them back is cheaper than finding new ones, just like customers. By the way, Marlene, something else I'll send to you. There's a young woman that just was brought on board at Kansas Department of Commerce, Emily Cisneros, and man, she's come out strong. And she is getting the word out about a number of training grants and funds and programs that they have. So I'll get that to you, that you can get it out to the people that are attending the call.
Okay, thank you.
She's terrific. They have programs for manufacturers and non-manufacturers, not just like aerospace kind of stuff. There are programs for both.
Great, thank you. How do you assess what your workforce needs are? Like how does a business know what they need?
One thing, and I'm not a big fan of surveys, but our bank has done, and they actually, Bill Ferguson's our CEO, and he's really a good communicator, and he leads by example. But we are every year now we're doing an employee survey, which we hadn't really ever done, and there's several other offshoots to that to get feedback, and we actually have implemented plans. If there was a negative being shown, we implemented plans to change that environment. So it's actually, it's kind of a pain to sit down and fill out a 20-minute survey. But it does provide good feedback. And I know the chamber has done that in a lot of things. And I almost always fill them out because I know it does provide some good feedback for especially programs and stuff that are going on. So I think it is good to get feedback. I think Josh and John have both alluded to the surveys they've had done, and those are really good as long as people are taking them seriously. So.
Yeah, and I would also add, in addition to employee surveys, I mean, how do your needs align with your strategic goals and your vision and stuff like that, and take stock to the number of employees and their skills and kind of where you need them, who's aligned with those strategic goals for the business, so that you have your key players identified during that time of recession, and make adjustments to the bench strength, I suppose, if you need to get somebody cross-trained or up-trained for a new role. That's important. Part of my role at the college is to go out kind of as an advisor to these businesses, small or large, and it doesn't cost anything, but I'll go out and do like a needs assessment, and I'll help identify where the challenges might be, offer some training suggestions. And you don't have to go with the community college. You can find another provider, or you can choose where to start next. But we do those kinds of things. John, I know there's some resources through the Small Business Development Center as well, where small businesses can do what is that called? We come in and kind of review the whole business plan and make recommendations, but it's at a strategic level.
The value opportunity
Yes.
profile. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I need a bigger cup of coffee. Yeah, thank you for that. And that is a good program where it really does a soup to nuts review of the business in terms of, because what we're seeing out in the economy, in addition to everything else that's going on, is this what they call the silver tsunami. They're going to be transferring hands in the next few years. It's $10 trillion worth of baby boomer owned businesses. When you think about that, the gross domestic product of the United States is 17 trillion. So we're talking about a huge amount of money. And the value opportunity profile is a tool to kind of plump up that bottom line and improve the valuation of that business. But aside from the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy, for sure. I'm doing a lot of financial analysis, but there's also a softer side to management. You talked about, Marlene, you asked about how they find out. We actually had to challenge our latest cohort in our GAME series. GAME is Growth Through Action, Measurement, and Engagement. It's a program for second stage businesses. Their homework or their challenge for the last quarter of this year is to meet with every single employee and just have a chat. They're affable people. They're good employers, but we had to kind of hold their feet to the fire with that regard. This doesn't cost you anything except maybe a cup of coffee or a beer if you want to go that way, on a happy hour. But when we talk about retaining customers, we talk about net promoter scores, and how likely would you be to recommend us? And we only want 9s and 10s. So we're asking our customers, but my God, we need to be 9s and 10s with our employees as well. Our managers and we as managers, we need to be reaching out and finding out what they need beyond the job, even if it's just an ear. Is an incredible amount of stress out there. They say about 3/4 of Americans right now are under an amount of stress that affects them physically and or mentally. 3/4 of Americans. All right. So there's a lot going on that's on their minds. I've got business owners, I've got students. When students introduce themselves at the beginning of the semester, my God, they've got a job or two, and they got a couple of kids and maybe a spouse if they're lucky. Sometimes they're raising the kids without a spouse, which is incredible at that age. There's just a lot of pressure on people right now. People are spending $500 more per month on food and fuel than they were before. So we've got to, it doesn't cost anything to have those conversations with these people and just find what's going on. So, and my last point, my last statistic, before the pandemic, 70% of the US workforce was disengaged from the job. Now, that doesn't mean that they were sabotaging the job, but they sure as heck weren't living it and giving it their all right? Their job was not their life. It was a paycheck. That was before the recession. I'm sorry, before the pandemic. Well, both. Before the pandemic. And the pandemic gave people a couple of years to take stock of what they do for a living, how they trade the biggest block of time that they have, basically, in their lives, how they trade that. And so, if we're talking about 3/4 of people under a huge amount of stress, a dangerous amount of stress, and at least 70% of people disengaged, we've got to have some conversations. And that gets right back to that management culture as well. So there's a need, and there's a very easy solution to that.
Thank you. Why is communication with your employees even more important during a recession?
Well, recessions aren't just stressful on the business owners. You know, the employees feel it too from the top down. So your employees may feel uncertain about what the future holds. And I think it's important that we be open and honest with them, communicate openly about what decisions we make and why we make those decisions. I've always had this style. I like to kind of try to engage my employees as much as I can into the decision-making process. Ultimately, it's my decision at the end of the day, but it makes them feel more engaged, more involved, more understanding, and it's less of a blow if you do have to make changes to your staffing or changes to work hours. I also think we talked a lot about flexibility, but I think it's important to consider giving employees a little bit more flexibility during those times of uncertainty. They may need times to disconnect a little more and find their purpose, find their why, continuing to maybe, if possible, and Google does a good job of this, but Google gives employees like 20% of the time every week to help drive innovation and come up with things. And so if things are starting to get difficult, if those are opportunities that you can give somebody to help you land and find that next big account, that next big service that you can provide to stay relevant, I think it's important. The last thing I'll mention about this is, John mentioned this earlier about, if you do have to let somebody go, I mean, you can sometimes supplement your business needs with a freelancer out there. So if, it gets to the point that you can't justify keeping a full-time IT support person, there's those fractional support resources available where you can transition over to one of those resources. Sometimes it does cost a little bit more initially, but you can get by with a freelancer or an independent contractor for a period of time until you can justify that full-time equivalent position.
What about we've talked a lot about employees and how to help them and how to work with them during this time. What about those sole proprietor businesses where it's just them? How do they deal with this uncertainty when they don't really have anyone to talk to? Do you have any tips for those business owners?
I have had a lot of that experience because a lot of my customers are sole proprietors. And I think we've talked about this a little bit, but you really have to have open lines of communications, not just with your employees, but with your external customers, your suppliers, especially in a downtime. I mean, you might be able to say, if you're having some cash flow problems, you might be able to talk to your supplier who might be you may be one of their good customers and they don't want to see that. I mean, the business goes through a lot of different phases. They might be willing to say, okay, we'll stretch your your payable out, 30 to 45 days rather than 10 days. So you can maybe, some of the stress, if you just keep it inside, doesn't help. You need to start talking with other people. And, I haven't said this, but Johnson County Community College is a great resource. They have people up there that can really help. If you just got to, I would suggest that you call them if you're having troubles, both business wise and with employees, but mainly with the business side. because they do offer a lot of resources there, and they're willing to at least talk and bounce some ideas off you. But most businesses do have a bank, and I would just call your banker and talk to them about what's going on if there's really problems going, because again, bankers hate surprises. So.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm about to put our phone number in there. So thanks for the commercial. Yeah, I mean, part of me would say work consultatively with your accountant, but at the same time, I've been doing this long enough to know that the accountants really fill that role. They make sure that things add up, and they add up, and it's a number, but it's negative $17,000, but it's the right number. They're done. You know what I mean? They came up with the right number on the bottom line, and they make you compliant for your taxes. We're happy to serve the role of like a fractional CFO, chief financial officer, and be looking at the numbers. My gosh, you talked about a sole proprietor. So I had a mom and business, one of my earliest clients, and came in here and they weren't sleeping well because they had about $36,000 on a Discover card at that point. And Dennis, you've seen that over and over again, I'm sure. I mean, I've got fantastic credit, but my God, if I could carry a balance on my Chase card, it's 18 or 24% at some crazy rate out there, you know? And so 36 grand tends to keep you up at night. And the wife's father was a CPA and was their accountant and had never advised them in 12 years of doing business to change prices. And so we took a look at their profit and loss statement. We took their fixed costs right below the line, added that up, divided, so what's it cost to provide this service, divided it by the number of hours that they could provide the service. It wasn't calculus, it was division, right? Fixed cost divided by the number of hours they could provide. And it turns out that it cost them $75 to provide the service that they did. And they were charging some customers that had been with them from day one, $55. And that math took about 4 minutes. You know what I mean? We took a look at their P&L, we added up all their fixed costs, we divided it by how many hours they had, and we knew how much per hour it cost them to provide the service. And then I asked them how much they were charging. That was a 4-minute conversation that their father, their accountant, a CPA, didn't have with these people. And that breaks my heart. Okay, again, it's not the role of the accountant, so do reach out to someone or hold your accountant's feet to the fire and have those conversations. Do you have to pay for them hourly? Yeah, per. If you don't want to do that, yeah, come Kansas businesses can come to talk to us. There are 3 MBAs here that are working for free. Work with your banker. The bankers see these P&Ls all the time for sure, and they've seen the pain that's in those, and sometimes the promise that's in those things. So you don't necessarily have to have a board unless you're a corporation, but you have an informal board of advisors that's available to you all the time. So please, God, do make use of those.
Yeah, the other thing is when your cash flow, I think we mentioned at the beginning is king. Rates, I mentioned earlier, prime is now at 7%. You may have a loan on your building and everybody wants to get their debt paid off. You may have a loan that's at 3.5%. And you're borrowing money on your line of credit at 7%. Now, don't pay off your 3.5% loan. Pay off your line of credit. Get that down, especially if it's a revolving line. You can always use it again if you need to. And if you are having cash flow and you have good asset equity and whatnot, you might be able to weather the storm, just to get through some periods that are tight cash flow wise by getting a line of credit. And that's, as I think John would just mention is, that it's really easy. And we look at margins all the time. And if your margins are shrinking, figure out why that's happening. And sometimes your old long-term customers, everybody works to make money. And if you're not making money, most people, maybe enjoy work some, but they aren't doing it just for the fun of it. You should be making money doing what you're doing. And sometimes you have to reprice, and people hate to increase prices, but and the cost, if your cost is going up, you have to look at that. So you really need to look at your margins and see where you're going. And we, at a bank, we do what's called spreads. We just, we put 5 years together of historical financial information, and we see what trends there are. And it's amazing what you can see if you can, and it's not that hard to do that kind of stuff. It's amazing to do what what over time has changed in your business. And that's what we try to focus on, those sorts of things. And then, everybody wants the newest and best thing. They want to go out and buy something that might make things easier for you, but it does may cost a certain amount of money. It may not be the right time to do something like that. But on the flip side, whenever someone else is struggling, these recessions and tough periods like we're going through tend to weed out those inefficient businesses. So there may be a chance that you can pick up business. I guess I try to look at the glass half full. If you're having troubles, probably other people are too, and try to get more lean and more efficient and figure out what else can you be doing to help the bottom line rather than detract from it. So.
And Dennis, you brought up a good point. Businesses do have a bit of a get out of jail free card, good Lord, with regard to raising prices. I mean, the number of times that well before the pandemic that I had to advise clients to bump up their prices, and they're like, well, what's going to happen? I'm like, well, do it and watch, because if you don't, you're going to go out of business. So you're going to have to do it. And they come back and 2 months later and like, nobody blinked, or the person that blinked was the lowballer, the Groupon buyer out there that wasn't going to provide any decent profit at all for them anyway. Especially if you're in a situation where you're just a new client comes on board and it's like, hey, what's your rate? Well, we're 105 an hour. They don't know that it was 85 last year. When I walked into the store and eggs were $3.62. Yeah, I knew that I was paying more. I used to be able to get them for 99 cents for a dozen sometimes when they were on sale. I saw that. It was very transparent. But if it's just a new rate, it is what it is, and you've got to make sure that you are keeping in touch and in step with your inputs, with the higher labor, with the higher costs, with the higher interest, and unfortunately passing that on. I mean, I don't enjoy inflation at all. I'm freaked out about what's going to happen. I rent right now because I didn't want to. I already bought a house on a bubble. It was my pen that broke the bubble, the mortgage bubble. And I signed that thing up. I popped it, and I had to write a check to leave that house. And I ain't doing that again. So I've been renting for a couple of years for the flexibility, and I live in fear of what the new lease is going to look like. So I don't enjoy inflation, but I'm still telling my business clients, look, you're going to have to step up prices to keep up with this stuff.
Well, does anyone joining us have any questions or comments that they want to ask? No questions? Okay. Well, thank you all, John, Josh, and Dennis. We appreciate your time, and it was great information. I found it informative and helpful. We'll share this video. What?
Unsettling.
Well, it's just the time we're in. So I will share this video. I'll send all of you a link, and then there will be a link on our website as well to it. So thank you again. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for y'all. And Marlene, I'll send you, before you send out the follow-up, let me get you the word clouds and the information on the training money. You can
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Not quite Oprah, Eric gets a car, and Joel gets a car, and Kaylee gets a car, and Dan gets a car. But we'll see what we can do. We can get you some training dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys, gals.
Thanks.
Is there a-
Bye.
Bye.